Yeah, we are recording now, and here we are, Jarkko and Ludger and Mayank and Tim and Daniel. We are on the beginning of another visual tools meeting, Clojure visual tools meeting, where we explore our tooling and workflows. More meetings are coming this week and in the coming weeks and further. And we will begin by introducing everybody who wishes to say something about themselves. So you're invited to say something about who you are, what you care about nowadays, just so that we can get to know each other. Um, Jarkko, would you like to begin?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jarkko from Helsinki, Finland, and I've been programming for maybe 14 years, and in maybe third or fourth year, I picked up Clojure for a bit and was really enthusiastic back then, but at the time I couldn't get all through everything how it was back then, so I went more with Python and PHP, and yeah, I'm a freelancer working with web stores and some warehouse management data issues, for example, which has been sort of a practical project where I've been getting to use Clojure because it's a tool that I really like enjoy to dive in and do things properly with it, while sort of the other programming languages are sort of just something that you want to write and get away from when you get the cash on your hand from the job currently. But yeah, I'm I've been also interested in different kind of Lisp runtime, Lisp runtimes and Clojure like languages, like getting Clojure running sort of in Python and also in PHP, and yeah, while learning to become a better engineer. Yep.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Ludger, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'm from Ludger Solbach from Germany, near Stuttgart. I'm a software architect nowadays. I have 40 years of programming experience, so old. I'm into Clojure since 2011. I have used it in a professional context also, but mostly in backend or tools. I'm the creator of OverArch, a tool to model software architectures in Eden and have it visualized with PlantUML and GraphViz, and have reports in Markdown. I'm really interested in Clay, in data science with Clojure, to get rid of this Python stuff. And I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is great to finally hear a little bit about you, because you have been so helpful behind the scenes and in the chat. So yeah, thanks. Mayank, would you like to say something if you could? Oh, hello.
Sure. So I am Mayank Prakash. I am based in Boston, US. So don't blame me for that.
No.
My first exposure to Lisp was in the early 80s, and it didn't take long for it to become my favorite language by far. Unfortunately, that enthusiasm wasn't shared by all of my employers in the intervening years. So I picked up a whole number of different languages during the intervening time frame. Started getting back into Clojure on my own for the last couple of years, and I've been doing some personal projects in Clojure. Emacs is my favorite environment for doing anything, and Cider is a great tool for working with Clojure, so that's what I've been using. I have not done any Clojure work in terms of professional job-related things, but mostly personal projects.
That is wonderful. Yeah, great to meet you, Mayank. And Tim, hello. If you could, I know you might be driving on the way, so no worries if you cannot talk. Oh,
I'm
can.
just switching over.
Oh, I see, I see. Yeah, yeah. So I will talk for a moment. I'm Daniel. My background is statistics and probability, and sometimes I do this data science and so on. And nowadays I'm involved in the Cyclone group in creating tools like Clay and a few of the libraries. And hello, Tim. Yeah, you're home.
Yes, I just made it back from dropping off the kid. So I'm Tim, longtime programmer. I think I first learned how to program 35 years ago. So in this particular group, that might make me a little bit of a youngin. C, C++, Java, JavaScript, Python, and now my favorite language, Clojure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great. So we will begin. We'll spend a few moments with community updates and then we will focus on Clay today. And yeah. Right. So I'll share the screen. So you can see my screen now. I just move a few things around. And by the way, what you see here, for anybody curious, for our friends listening to the recording, this is the Zulip chat, which is the main space where we at Cycloj collaborate and create our knowledge and conversations. And this is the topic thread for this session. So later on, we may share some resources here and so on. And this is the slideshow for today. And we begin with a few community updates before we focus on Clay. One thing is the Cycloj website, for those who haven't got to know it. So that's Cycloj, our group. Here you can find our events and different things which we share, and opportunities to get involved in open source and so on. And Cycloj is this group behind this project and has been running for 6 years. And one thing we want to talk about is the events which we were organizing more than before. These days are kind of busy with lots of public meetings. You can find the events in our different groups. This is the so-called visual tools group, and you see this week there are 3 of these meetings where people share different workflows and tools they use. And a couple other groups which are active are the AI group and the real world data group, where people share their experiences and so on. And you can find all of these in this page for events. The Clojure calendar feed for events was created by our friend Gert. And there is this viewer created by Martinas, which is kind of useful as a way to keep track of things. And you can also add this to your calendar app and so on. So I encourage anybody who is listening to this recording to, join and follow our events. And here with each event, usually we have these event pages. The Cycloj events are published on the Clojureverse, and here you can add to your calendar. It is very recommended to, add your participation, so, we'll know how to prepare and so on. Yeah, and looking forward for people to join the meetings later this week. And yeah, so that's about that. And another thing is the coming conference, the Cycloj Light conference, which is where, in a couple of months, a few people will be sharing the data stories, data analysis stories. It is a whole conference about data stories, with some background sessions for, to get prepared to learn a little bit of the math and the library's relevance for data analysis. And the list of speakers is almost ready. We'll publish that in a few days. And hopefully, if anybody wishes to take on this kind of project and speak in future conferences, we'll have more of them later on this year. And maybe another announcement to make is the Macro Expand project, which is a new series of broad meetings where we will mostly collaborate on community thinking, thinking together with different individuals and groups of the Clojure community on how we help Clojure grow into new landscapes and new use cases where it hasn't been active. And to us at Cycloge, it has become very important and is going to be one of the main goals this year to help things expand. And if anybody wishes to be involved in that or has some thought about it, then let us chat. And yeah, so that's what that was about. A few things which are going on in the community. And please don't stop me anytime. I hope we explore together and practice a little bit of the workflow with the Clay tool. But maybe some ideas will come up and we'll explore other things if anybody wishes to propose something. A little bit of background about Clay. So Clay is part of this culture called namespace as a notebook. This is this kind of practice that we've been using in Clojure for years already. I think about 6 or 5 years at least, it has been very common to use the Clojure namespace as the source of truth for a notebook. So we do whatever we do in the Clojure namespace and just render that as a document, as a notebook. And the point is that, different communities may have different pieces of tools for creating notebooks, for documentation, for publishing. And for us, Clojurians, it is very common that we want to stay in our Clojure namespace as the main space we interact with. And a few earlier tools were Oz and Notespace. We've been using them both in the Cycloge community, and Notespace has been our own project. And later on, there was also the Clerk tool, which is more common nowadays. All of these were very clever in different ways, trying to have some dynamic interaction between the Clojure editor and the browser, where we have some document being rendered gradually. And I assume they are familiar to most Clojurians nowadays, at least some variation of this experience. And I think in a moment we'll see one concrete way where we do it, which is Clay. And yeah, so Clay can be seen as a continuation of this culture, but there is a difference. The difference is that all of these were so clever, and Clay tries to be simple and stupid. And I hope we'll get this impression today that it is just a thin layer of interaction. Yeah, so the goals of Clay, which is a project that began gradually 3 years ago in different forms. The goals were first, to have a tool for both data visualization and notebooking, both exploring and publishing, right? So we can create visual documents from our code for varying needs. And it had to be simple and stupid, mostly because we have been struggling in creating and using clever tools. And at least for a few of us, the more clever tools were never simple enough. And we wanted something that would be so obvious to use. And that is Clay. And another goal was making it very easy to publish documents from our code in this, so-called literate programming approach. Publish documents in a way that allows us to to create books, notebooks, slideshows, websites, all of them in the same fashion. And the fourth goal was compatibility. The idea was that Clay would be compatible with the new standard we began creating back then, the kindly standard. And the kindly standard is a way to specify how things should be visualized. And as long as we follow this standard, our notebooks, our documentation can be used from different tools that support the same standard. So this allows us to create a stack of tools and libraries that work together with the same code. And we'll see a little bit of that later on. Yeah, so that's about the goals of Clay. And just briefly about the kindly standard, you can read about the list of kinds here in the kindly documentation. Different kinds of data visualization that can be used in different use cases. And I think most of it has been already used in data exploration, data analysis projects, and so on. And the idea of a standard is that different tools will support that. So, this little piece of code says this data structure should be considered as the plotly kind, which is, just certain data visualization format. So this little piece of code will just work in different tools which are kindly compatible. And nowadays, these different tools are Jupyter notebooks, the Calva IDE, the Cursive IDE, which will be announced in a few days, I think, and Portal, at least partially, and Clay, mostly Clay. And that's the catalog of kinds. And there is also the Kindly Render project, which is a common engine that will be usable from different tools that wish to support the Kindly standard. And we may chat more about this idea later. So that's about Kindly. And before we dive into the workflow and practice using Clay, we just mentioned that many different projects do use Clay for documentation and for data exploration. And for example, you may look into this Wolframite documentation. Wolframite is the bridge to the Wolfram language for scientific uses, right? And you can see these visual documents, and all of it is rendered as a book, which is searchable, and you can search and travel the table of contents and so on. So that's the publishing we support. And maybe another example is the Clojure Tidy Tuesdays. Oh, not available at the moment, never mind. So maybe Tableplot is another example where we have this documentation of data visualization functions, which is this kind of interlinked documents where we have different functions and keys, and they are all kind of connected in one document. And so later on, we may talk more about this practice of publishing books out of Clojure namespaces. So these are a few projects that use Clay, and maybe zoom out a little bit. Yeah, and I think the Synod Light conference that we mentioned earlier, this conference will all use Clay notebooks for documenting all the data analysis projects that will be presented in the conference. And yeah, now we can move to a demo. And so, we have our browser and editor here. We'll practice a little bit some interaction. Maybe I'll stop sharing for a moment and we'll see how we are. Maybe there are some thoughts or comments before we begin the demo, or any ideas or anything you think we should focus on, especially today. Yeah, great. So I'll share the screen again. Right. Yeah, so I think you see my screen now, and maybe another thing we should mention is the Nodge toolkit. This is, I think, rather famous at the moment. This toolkit for data analysis that contains a few things together, including Clay. And since Nodge has Clay included, it can provide a certain beginner-friendly experience in using Clay for data analysis projects. And maybe that's the first thing we wish to discuss today, the beginner mode, which is kind of new. It is something we began supporting only recently, and that's our main entry point. We're hoping to offer to people who are new to Clojure and wish to experience Clojure in a lightweight notebooking experience, in a data analysis context, and so on. So one way we can use this is by downloading the jar file, which is released with Nodge. And when we download this jar file, oh, I already have it downloaded, never mind. And so when we download this jar file, we will be able to run the jar file as a program. And only Java is needed, basically, to do that. So, I'll open the terminal here, and maybe I'll create a directory. And in this directory, I'll be running the jar, right? So this is the jar file I just downloaded, which is the whole Nodge toolkit that includes Clay. And when you run this, what you experience is this live reload experience, where you see Clay is watching a new directory called notebooks, right? So in the notebooks directory, you can create a notebook file and just edit it as a Clojure file. So let us do that. So I'll open another terminal, and in the notebooks directory, right, which is empty at the moment, I'll just edit small Clojure file. Let us maybe call it example.clj. Right, so it is, just a Clojure file. And when I write something inside and save this, then you see Clay was listening, and it noticed the file change event, and it opened the browser view where we can explore the contents of the file. So that's the command line interface mode of using Clay. And it has this live reload experience, which of course is not new in the Clojure community. And of course, the tools we mentioned earlier, like Oz and Notespace and Clerk, they all supported different variations of this. And of course, it is also very much popular in the web development scene with Figwheel and Shadow CLJS, right? And here we have that too as a little data analysis experience where, we can write some things and explore. And right, we can have a range of numbers. Again, I save the file, and the view should update. And that's it, basically, right? We have a notebook. And then, we were wondering about what would help us improve this experience, right? There is something nice about this, and we know this from other tools. We know that the fact that we don't assume so much, we don't have any IDE involved, we don't need any integration of our editor or plugins and packages. We just edit a file and save it. That's all we need to do for this exploration, right? We may have some error, I do something wrong, and I save, and I save, and then it says, oh, divide by 0, and then I know, okay, I change it. And right, it is just a very basic experience, which is dynamic and exploratory. And then we were wondering, could we make it more local in the notebook, right? Because typically we may have lots of things written in our namespace, and the notebooks become long, how can we make it very local so we can explore a little thing as we usually like to do in Lisp? And that brought us to the idea of the narrow feature. And what we do to support that is that we write the comma notation inside a given form. And then when I save the file, only that form is visualized. And this allows us for, this more interactive experience of just very locally changing something and exploring it. Right? Maybe we can spend just a little more time here before we move to other features. So yeah, maybe let us turn this into a namespace as we usually do in Clojure, right? And we can require, let us require kindly which is this, catalog of kinds. So we can say that something has a given kind. So for example, we may say, maybe let us remove this arrow here. We may say that something is of kind hiccup, right? Hiccup is this Clojure way of representing HTML. So we can create a div, and with the div, we can have a list of things, right? And one, and so on. Right, so now when we save the file, we see the HTML rendering of the hiccup, right? Because hiccup is one of the kinds supported. And again, we can make it local, right? And then we can explore just this. And maybe just for fun, let us replace this with something visual like an SVG, right? So the SVG will have a circle. Small radius, something like that, right? And I save the file, and I have a small circle, and then I play it along, and I know I changed something, and I save the file, and it should be bigger, right? And so on. So that's the experience of exploring some local thing in a big notebook, possibly, right? And that was the beginning of a beginner-friendly experience we started creating recently. We will really appreciate any, bug reports and proposals for improving this. One thing that will get lots of attention is error messages. Now at the moment, now at the moment, we know that Clojure error messages, they are not the most beautiful thing, and we can hope for something better here. And that's something we will be discussing more in future sessions. And yeah, and also, the whole event handling of this live reload experience, we need to make it more robust. So we really appreciate any bug report and so on. And yeah, maybe I should stop recording for a moment and see how we are, and if we have anything to talk about. Yeah. Any thoughts, any comments so far? I think what we were showing is maybe familiar to a few of us, and so maybe not so surprising. And still, maybe we have some thoughts before we continue. Great. So
I like it. I like it. I like the beginner experience. So it's easy you don't have to know an editor, but it's more accessible like the CLI. I really like it.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Tim, who is here with us, Tim has been exploring this and noticing some little bugs. So we will, really appreciate just trying it and challenging it. And probably if you bring some heavy computation, it might create some strange situations for the event handler and so on. And we will gradually improve. Yeah, and yeah, and maybe one thought we had was how far we could go if we're thinking about this situation where we only edit a file. That's all we do. We only edit a file, and we have a process listening and rendering something in the HTML page. Clay will remain simple and stupid, but other tools can be clever, can do some interesting things, can have some browser UI, or maybe have other notation, not just this comma, but other things that can, have different variations of behavior. And we really encourage, this kind of exploration. Even if we keep Clay simple, other tools may have other innovations in that field, as we could see with Clerk and so on. Yeah, great. So I'll share the screen again and we will continue. Right. So yeah. So we did talk about the CLI and library load and narrowing. And now about the more central piece of Clay, which is being REPL friendly. What does it mean? So what it means is that we want Clay to just behave in a way that doesn't interfere with the usual way we work with Clojure. Right? So let us create a small Clojure project and just explore a little bit. So I have an empty directory now. I'll create a deps.eden file. Right? And in the deps.eden file, what we usually do is, we add one dependency, which is the Nodge toolkit, right? Nodge should include what we usually need for data analysis and data visualization, data processing scenarios, right? So we have Nodge as a dependency. In this case, I'll also add Clay, even though Clay is included in Nodge. Sometimes there are some Clay updates which are just more up to date compared to Nodge. So we'll have both of them here, right? And as usual, here I use Emacs, but I'm using Emacs, but other editors should be good as well. Later on, we'll see VS Code. I'm starting the REPL. In a moment, the REPL will be running, and we will explore. And let us maybe, as we usually do, we'll create a notebooks directory. Right, so I'll create a notebooks directory. And here I'll create one notebook. Let us call it example. Right, so we have one namespace, and we wish to use this namespace as a notebook. Right, and what I'll be showing now is not new. I think many people use Clay this way. And the idea is that, after we evaluate the namespace and we see that it is working and we add some code, right? And we do all that, we can ask our editor to render the namespace through Clay, right? So in Emacs, you have these commands like Clay, make namespace HTML, right? And when you run this, Clay for the first time, loads and runs and renders the namespace in the browser, right? So that's the usual way to use Clay, right? To, have some visual display alongside our editor. That could be any editor, right? And of course, what we like to do in Clojure is evaluate little things, like I evaluate this, or I evaluate, just this little thing inside, or the whole thing, right? And so we want all that to be compatible with the Clay experience, and it is, because Clay has commands like Clay make last S expression that will just make this last form, right? And if I do it here, then it will just give us the number 3, because the last S expression was this last form, right? So Clay tries to be just as the REPL, right? That's a core principle here. And of course, usually we have some key bindings, and we can render things in different ways. And so that's the basic experience. That's what we mean when we say that it is REPL friendly. And any comments about that, or do you wish me to try anything specific? Any ideas or thoughts?
I'm interested regarding. I'm researching a bit on how could you render the output on Emacs. So you could have a SVG in Emacs, and there's, for example, Emacs Vega view. That's one package I find. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, with the plotting API, how, because there's the interchangeable Plotly.js and the Vega Lite, I would be interested in seeing sort of something about that layer and what kind of tools do you have accessible from that kind of a higher layer, the Hanami style templates stuff.
Yeah, I haven't tried, but it is a good idea to try. And yeah, so you just gave us an idea for a future session. And yeah, possibly we should put more care into alternative rendering targets which are not just the browser, even though, yeah, which are not just the browser, but maybe an SVG file or plain HTML, which doesn't require JavaScript and all those variations. And the kindly render engine that we mentioned earlier is built in a modular way that should eventually support these different targets. And that's important because eventually Clay will be refactored to use this new engine. And I think that, in terms of our priorities, it would be good to support that project that eventually will, will allow us to use these things interchangeably. But yeah, thank you for this idea. I hope we come back to it soon. Yeah. Maybe I should mention another thing, and that's that usually what we do in Clojure development is, we create namespaces where we have functions and we use these functions, right? And we do things like that, right? And usually we want our whole namespace to be evaluated quickly, right? We want it to be easy to change a little thing and update the whole thing, right? And of course, sometimes in data analysis situations, there are slower things that take more time to evaluate. And there have been lots of discussions recently about how we can still keep our namespace as something that evaluates quickly without losing the ability to perform things which are slow. And of course, there are Clojure idioms like def-once and memoirs, and combining these things allow us to do certain things. And maybe that's not today's topic. Maybe at the end we can explore a little bit how we combine them. And there is another idiom that is very much useful in Clay, and that is delay. Maybe delay is familiar to you. The idea of a Clojure delay is that we can define some piece of computation that can be slow or not, right? Maybe let us make it slow. Sleep a little bit and then compute something. And when you define a delay, defining it is quick. Only when you ask for the value, like by dereferencing the value, only then you need to wait, blocking with the slow computation, right? So that's similar to other things which are dereferable in Clojure. And for the delay, the logic is just delayed computation. It just happens when you ask it to. And the way Clay handles delays is that they can be included in the namespace. And when they are included in the namespace, evaluating the namespace is quick. It is quick, as it is usually, as it is always, right? Because evaluating a delay form doesn't take time. It is just defining the delayed computation. But rendering it will actually realize the delays, right? So Clay has this dual behavior where, as long as we don't use Clay to make anything rendered, everything is just quick as usual. But when we actually render the whole thing, we need to wait a little moment. Or when we render a little detail, just this form, we will also wait for 1 second for it to compute, right? This allows us to create namespaces which are quick to evaluate, but do render fully with all the data visualizations we care about. So that's one recommended practice that we have in Clay, and we're exploring more of these, and it would be good to have a whole discussion one day about workflows with slow computations. And I'm just checking, I see there is a comment in the chat. Oh, Emacs figure view, yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, Jarko. Any comments, any thoughts before we continue? We have 45 minutes to the official time. Oh, Tim. Hey.
I'm curious if you put that delay inside of a rich comment, does that avoid it running all together, but you could still evaluate it?
Yeah, right. So I'll share the screen again. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for bringing that. Right. So
and perhaps there's other tricks for, you know, kind of turning things on and off as you go. But it's just one thought.
Right. So rich comments are this thing which is actually named after Rich Hickey, and it is kind of isn't it strange that Rich Hickey has created so many things and only the comments are named after Rich, right? But, yeah, but here we can have things inside comments, and you know the usual way is that when we are inside the comment we can evaluate something like this or that or this, but when we evaluate the whole namespace, comments do not evaluate. Clay does not break this. No, so when I evaluate this namespace, the delay here will be realized, but the comment will not. So that's the Clay behavior. And at the moment, even though it could be a good idea to explore that, I think we will not change it because it would be a breaking change and people may rely on this behavior already. Does it make sense? Yeah, that's the way it is.
It's essentially like in the REPL.
Yeah, yeah, right. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, let us come back to our slideshow and discuss another thing, and that is being IDE friendly. So here, you know, by IDE, we mean those things which are not just an editor, but actually, you know, arguably a more complete experience like VS Code or IntelliJ. It is maybe a little arbitrary to call them IDEs and Emacs and Vim not, but the point about a few of these, like VS Code and IntelliJ and Pulsar, which is written in Clojure script, all of these allow data visualizations inside the editor and basically allow having a full browser inside. Clay can play well with that. And these are news from the last week. A lot of effort has been done recently by Timothy Prattley collaborating with IDE makers of Calva and Cursive. And now, at least in Calva, we can already see data visualizations rendered inside the editor. So yeah, maybe let us see that just for a moment. So I'll open VS Code in the current directory, and we have VS Code with Calva, and right, and we have our directory with our files, right? Oh, right, here's our example notebook, and right, the same code. And now what we can do, oh, maybe let us something about my VS Code setup is strange suddenly. Oh, is my oh yeah. Oh yeah, it was just slow to begin. Yeah, I think the Zoom app is taking all my machine's resources. So it did just what was just taking time to load, right? So I'll just clean a few things up, and so we can focus on what we care about. And now you see Calva, the VS Code IDE for Clojure, just began the Clojure REPL, which is running now, and we have the same namespace. And here as well, we can evaluate, right, and so on. What we could do now is use the so-called Calva REPL commands, which are ways to call certain Clojure commands from within Calva. We can use that to render Clay visualizations. Right? So here I open the usual command panel and I look for Calva custom REPL commands, and here you have these commands. These should be available for you if you have Clay in your project. And for example, we may ask to make the namespace as HTML, right? And we got it inside VS Code.
I'm just checking.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just checking if I have them available.
Oh, thank you. Right. So I think you should have the recent version of Clay because there have been some changes. So yeah, and anyway, basically that's that. And you know, as we can also have other commands like Calva custom REPL commands, and we can ask to just make the current form, so it will visualize only one form, and so on, right? And maybe I leave Calva for now just because I'm less familiar and my machine is struggling with resources. But basically, that's the idea. That's the big news by the efforts of Timothy and Peter, the Calva author. And we will explore more of that soon. But for now, it is good to know we can have that. Here we are back in Emacs, and yeah, so that was about IDE integration, and we're working with IntelliJ, Cursive, and Pulsar, Lazoli, and so on, and thankfully the IDE makers are very open to adding this support, so it will happen soon over there too. And maybe another thing that we should mention is that there is another way to visualize things inside VS Code, for example, and other editors, and still be kindly compatible, and that is the kindly render library that we mentioned earlier. So this engine, the kindly render engine, which was created by Timothy Prattley and later on extended by Carsten Behring, this engine can be run as is from within Calva without Clay being involved. And that provides a slightly simpler experience. From the user perspective, it doesn't matter much, but the setup is slightly easier and there will be benefits in the future. And that's a great demonstration for the recent work by Carsten in making this kindly render engine grow and be compatible. And yeah, so that's another future topic we should talk about. Now about publishing, right? We did mention that was one of the goals of Clay, and Clay supports this system called Quarto. I think this is familiar to many people. Quarto is a general tool used by many languages for publishing books and websites and slideshows and notebooks and so on. And you may explore the gallery of different things created, the dashboards and so on, many things created by Quarto. And Clay supports Quarto as a target format. That means we can begin with our Clojure namespace and generate Quarto documents, which can then be rendered into many other things. And let us just briefly see a few of the typical situations here. One is that, we have this namespace and we want to make it through Quarto. So we may call Clay make namespace Quarto HTML. And then what we get in the browser is the resulting rendering, which is slightly slower depending on what we have now. My machine is struggling a little bit, but oh, did it crash? Oh yeah, so Quarto was just running, and you see that's the way things look when they render through Quarto. And there are many themes and fonts and styles, and you can customize this very well. And you can create books and so on. And a lot of our current documentation is of Clojure project is created this way. And so basically that's the idea. We create a QMD file, which is the Quarto document, and then Quarto takes care of the rest and turns that into your target format. Maybe just for another example, you can turn this into a slideshow. So for this, we need to, divide our namespace into sections, so it will not be too big for a slideshow. And something like that, right? So we have this markdown notation for subsections, and now when I do play, make namespace Quarto reveal.js, it will render this through Quarto with a reveal.js target, which is this target format for slideshows. Very slow now, which is not the usual situation, but is Zoom making my machine struggle. But now we have this slideshow with animations, and as you usually have with reveal.js. So that's just another common use of this ability to go through the Quarto publishing system. And yeah, any comments about that? Any thoughts about Quarto?
Yeah, that was nice to see. I actually was recently just looking for some, like how to make slideshows from there.
Oh yeah. So I'll be glad to let us look together into your use case and see what we can learn from it as usual. And yeah.
But I have to jump to another meeting. So
thank you, Jarkko. Great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, take care.
See ya.
I'm also interested in creating slideshows or other representations of the notebook.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and of course, one day we hope to have better support for PDF targets, right? And at the moment, PDF will not work with all our data visualizations because we need better support in turning things into images and so on. So there is more compatibility to be reached. And for now, HTML is the main target for us. And yeah, coming back to the slideshow, test generation is another little thing worth mentioning that has become important because, our Notch toolkits, for example, this toolkit that integrates many libraries, it has lots of integration tests and lots of documentation. And basically these things are related, right? Documentation should be testable, and tests should be written as documents so we can have them readable and understandable. And Clay supports this way of generating tests from notebooks, right? So the way it works, for that we will need the Kindly API. And we can add something like maybe we have some computation, right? And then we may add a test. So we can do something like kind test last equals 9. And what it will do is not change anything in the resulting notebook, right? If we render this notebook, it will just, where is my Clay view? Will just look the same with, just the output, which is 9. But when we have that, it does generate tests. So now we got a new namespace, a test namespace. Example generated test, which is just a regular test file, but it does define a var to be our computation 4 plus 5, and it does check that this var equals 9, right? So this way, we can have literate testing or testable documents, right? We can make sure our documentation is correct, and we can use it to make our libraries testable in a readable way. So that's a core idea of Clay now, that it integrates these two practices. And another thing that we have only started exploring in the last few months is generating documentation with many links inside. And I think this is very valuable to have a good practice for documenting our libraries. And maybe one example worth looking into is the table plot library that we looked into earlier. Node itself also uses Clay in certain ways to document things with many code examples and so on. And table plot is one place where we have explored the idea of creating an API reference, for example, with all the function doc strings and visual examples alongside them. So, you have those many different plotting functions like layer, line, layer, violin, right? So layer violin is a function here. What we see here is the doc string. And then later on, we have some code examples. And all this was generated as one page, which is part of the book. And here you see you also have links to the relevant keys that you may wish for controlling this plotting. So for example, it turns out there is something like mean line visible that is relevant for violin plot, and we can look this up in the same document. So this is a highly interlinked system, and we generate that from a regular Clojure namespace. And at the moment, it is a little bit ad hoc. We want to generalize this practice and make it easier to document libraries in this way. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing we're kind of looking to explore more soon.
Daniel, could you show the source code? So
the
thing, how this translates to the generated documentation.
That's a good idea. Thank you. So I go to the bottom, and here we have the link to the source code. And here in the source code, what we have is things like that. Let us, for example, search for violin. Oh, not this one. Yeah, so this call to book utils includes function var as section. What this does is basically include a new section in the document with the doc string of the function. And, it is just generating markdown, basically. It is generating markdown from the doc string, and it turns symbols into links. So it is all about string processing. And you see these functions, they are ad hoc functions. They are not something that we have generalized yet. But the point is that we can include these generated markdown beginnings of sections. And after that, we just include code examples as usual. All I can say for now is that the experience writing this was comfortable, easy to explore, easy to update. And I'll be really glad to look into another library with a similar use case and help document that library or another project, and keep learning till we generalize. And for now, I think for a while we should, continue case by case till we have something more general. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, we'll talk briefly about near-term hopes, and then if people have time, we will just explore a little bit, maybe have some data exploration. So kindly render integration is something which is coming soon, and there has been so much work by both Timothy Prattley and Carsten Bering on the kindly render engine, and it has to be integrated into Clay as it is integrated into the current Jupyter kernel, Clojure and so on. And that will be a big change for Clay, which hopefully is unnoticed by the user, but it will mean a lot about compatibility with other tools that will be just cleaner and simpler. And it will make things more modular and support new target formats as we discussed. So that's one coming change, which is kind of big. Another thing is error messages, and there have been many ideas by Timothy and others about how we can use the browser view to visualize error messages in a way where we can dive into them and see things in different ways that will make them more understandable. And some of this is rather general and can be done to the usual Clojure stack traces. Some of it will be more specific to certain libraries where we need to take care of very specific errors. A lot of our hopes and priorities for the coming period will be about that. And another thing we did mention was general support for library documentation that will hopefully integrate doc strings, tutorials, and unit tests, and UI explorations, right? So we'll say it again. Clay is simple and stupid, but other tools can support the same standard and use the same rendering engine and do much more in many variations. And we could imagine browser UIs and other ways of interaction that will actually not be so difficult to implement, but will allow Clojure people to create beginner-friendly, easy experiences for doing visual work and data analysis and other notebooking tasks. And we're really encouraging anybody who has some good UI ideas to collaborate with us and use the kindly render engine and explore how these things can be done in slightly different ways. And actually, a couple of people are doing something like that, and probably in our coming meetings, we'll have some updates about these experiences. Yeah, so that was a little overview of near-term hopes for Clay. And maybe we can come back now to the editor and browser and maybe just explore a little bit, just so that we have maybe just a more elaborate demonstration of our practice. Maybe I'll create another namespace, or maybe I'll just stop for a moment and see if we have any thoughts, any questions. We have 20 minutes to the official time, and if you have time, we can explore a bit. Or maybe you think we should do another thing. Any idea about what you may like to see? I think it would make sense to have some data set we dive into, so it will be just a little more concrete. We can see a table and a plot, which is not meaningless as everything has been so far. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can see some kindly visualizations of the different kinds.
Yeah, let us do that. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, let us try to use a few of those kinds. So yeah, I'll create another namespace. Let's call it example1. And maybe let us use one of those data sets we have. So maybe you know about this R datasets collection of the R community. This is now available from Clojure as part of the knowledge toolkit, thanks to the work by Carsten. And this means we can, have a namespace with many functions that will just fetch those CSV files and bring them to us. So I think there was one about maybe housing prices, which is something, that we can kind of relate to because we live in homes, so we may know something about that. So you see, there are those different packages these things come from. So if we want this dataset, we should say something like our dataset /AER house prices. And when we call this, we got a dataset. And this is, of course, a data structure of the TechML dataset implementation, this high performance dataset, data frame library. And of course, we can use that from tablecloth and so on. Yeah, and we can also send it to the browser to be visualized in Clay. And did I forget the key binding suddenly? Oh yeah, I should save the file probably for the first time. Right. So that's our table, and maybe let us begin by exploring a little bit and making some very basic visualization, and then we can maybe think about other kinds of visualizations. But yeah, just before that, we can go to the docs for these house prices dataset. Okay, so maybe it is kind of straightforward to make sense of. So yeah, so one way we like to visualize is the table plot library, which has a few APIs, and one of them is the Plotly API, which is currently the recommended one for most use cases. And the usual way we use that is that we use a threading macro and pass our dataset to a Plotly call to create a layer of points, for example. Oh, maybe I should, hit load now, layer point, and then we provide those keys in a map. So the x-axis will be maybe the x-axis will be the lot size. So we try to see the relationship with the y-axis, which is the price. Right. So now, I have this key binding that allows me to just send it by Clay to the browser. Okay, so that is that. And now maybe we can color this, right? So we can have more information. And maybe I'll see the dataset again. So maybe we color it by whether we have a garage or not, right? So the color will be garage. And now we have a little problem because garage was a numerical column, so it tries to create this smooth gradient coloring for this, but that's not what we want. We want to distinguish different values of garage. So it should actually be we should be explicit and say the color type is nominal, not quantitative. So it will be colored in distinct colors. And now we see that having or not having a garage is maybe not so informative to the price. And maybe we could spend more time with it and explore more, but I'm unsure. Maybe that's not the most interesting question now. So I keep exploring and look for another one. And I mostly try to kind of show the workflow where we just change little things and explore. So yeah, maybe driveway, right? Driveway.
Maybe we have to do a principal component analysis for us.
Oh, which is kind of difficult with these discrete sparse values, right? But yeah, maybe, yeah. So given the time, yeah, maybe.
Was just fun.
Yeah, we could actually try. Yeah, yeah. So I'll. Yeah. So yeah, maybe let us visualize this one and think about what we wish to do with the time we have. Right. So let us color by driveway and. Okay, this is more informative. So we see that there are smaller apartments and bigger apartments in a way, given the lot size. And the smaller ones may have no garage, but the bigger ones usually have garage, at least in the town where we have some data here, which is Windsor, that I've never been at, but I can imagine that the big ones have garages there, right? So yeah, this is just, a little bit of data exploration, but yeah, should we think about what we may do now? Should we actually do some statistics as you proposed, or do we wish to focus on visualization?
I'd like to focus on visualization. Maybe Tim, what's your interest?
Yeah. Are we curious about anything we may wish to see now?
Do you have an example with Emmy and Clay? Because there are Emmy viewers.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, at the moment I cannot hear you so well. It is like you're far away now,
Okay.
like behind the towers behind you. But oh, now it is better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let us talk about Emmy. You mentioned Emmy, I think. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Let us talk about that. That's actually important to talk about. Right. So just for the people listening to this discussion, we have this Emmy system in Clojure, which is this math and physics library. And alongside Emmy, there is this collection called Emmy Viewers, which is this collection created by Sam, where we have different data visualization libraries that can be used in this Lispy syntax. Basically, these are JavaScript libraries which are wrapped by reagent, this Clojure script React wrapper, and where we can create very interactive math visualizations and so on. And Sam has created Emmy viewers, first and foremost, to be compatible with Clerk and Portal, which are those two amazing tools, very different tools, each of its own clever UI. And we have started supporting them in Clay. So in the Clay documentation, we can see we have this Emmy chapter with the Emmy viewers which are currently supported. And so you see some of them, like this maths library, are supported, and we can create these interactive visualizations. And the way it works is that Clay supports the Skittle interpreter, a certain form of the SCI interpreter running in the browser. And Skittle, one of those famous projects by Bogtut, Skittle has a certain notion of plugins where you can add ClojureScript libraries that will be used together with this Skittle interpreter. And This means that whenever we create those plugins, we can include those data visualizations in plain HTML files, not just in a huge React component like we have in other tools like Clerk and Portal, but actually embedded in our blogs, in our plain HTML documentations, like those we create in Clay. And there has been a beginning of this work on making Emmy viewers work in as a Skittle plugin. And this work needs to be continued. There have been some challenges, not very interesting ones, but difficult sometimes, just, about building the JavaScript and Clojure script code in a compatible way. And if anybody wishes to be involved in continuing that, it can be a promising project that will allow all this Emmy viewer system to work in blogs and so on, and books, not just through Clay, but through all the other systems like Clojupyter and those new inline visualizations in Calva and so on. So yeah, and we could explore a little bit now, even though every time I look into this, I need to recall the syntax, so I might be a bit slow with figuring out the way to write things. Yeah, what do you think? What should we explore now? Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's actually important, important direction. Can I ask, do you use Emmy?
Not yet, but I'm interested in it. I have some libraries for astronomy, for example, and for photography, the physical calculations, and I like to visualize them in some way. And Emmy viewers are maybe the best way to visualize some of the results in Clojure. So that's what my interest comes from.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it looks very useful for teaching ideas, right?
Yes.
For teaching math and geometry and
because it's interactive and
yeah, that's very promising. I'm looking at the clock and we have a few minutes to the official time. Maybe in a moment we stop the recording. Maybe you may need to go or stay, but in any case, it is good to have a few moments to chat without anything recorded. So if there is no more comments for the recording, then I'll stop now and say goodbye to our listeners. Yeah. So goodbye to our listeners. See you on the next times, which are more meetings this week. And take care.